Hello, everyone. Today, we're diving into one of the most baffling murder cases ever investigated by police. A case so mysterious that, at first glance, it looked like a clear suicide. The victim was found dead inside a locked room. There were no signs of forced entry, no witnesses, no suspicious activity on security cameras. And yet, someone had been murdered. The question was simple. If the room was locked from the inside, how did the killer get in? And more importantly, how did they get out? As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered secrets worth millions of dollars, betrayal between trusted partners, and a tiny mistake that would eventually expose the killer. Stay with us until the very end, because this case proves one thing. No matter how carefully a crime is planned, the truth always leaves a trail behind. Let's begin.
On a cold October evening, 54-year-old businessman Michael Harrison sat alone in his luxurious mansion on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas. Michael was the founder of a highly successful construction company that had earned hundreds of millions of dollars over the years. To the outside world, he seemed to have everything: money, power, respect. But behind the scenes, his life was far more complicated. Over the past few weeks, Michael had become increasingly stressed. According to friends and employees, he had discovered something alarming within his company. Something that kept him awake at night. Something he refused to discuss openly. No one knew exactly what it was, but whatever Michael had discovered, it was serious enough to make him fear for his life. That night, around 9 p.m., he dismissed most of the household staff and retreated to his private office on the second floor. It would be the last time anyone saw him alive.
The following morning, at approximately 8:30 a.m., Michael's housekeeper arrived with his usual breakfast. She knocked on the office door. No answer. She knocked again. Still nothing. At first, she assumed Michael was asleep. But after repeated attempts to contact him, concern quickly turned into panic. Family members were called. Security personnel arrived. Eventually, the decision was made to force the door open. What they found inside left everyone stunned. Michael Harrison was sitting motionless in his chair. A gunshot wound marked his chest. Blood had dried across his expensive suit. A handgun rested near his hand. The room was locked from the inside, and every window was secured. At first glance, it appeared to be suicide. But something about the scene didn't feel right. Police were immediately notified.
Lead Detective Robert Hayes arrived at the mansion within an hour. He had spent more than 20 years investigating violent crimes. As he examined the office, something immediately caught his attention. The gun had been placed near Michael's right hand, but according to family members, Michael was left-handed. It was a small detail, but experienced detectives know that small details often solve big cases. Forensic specialists soon discovered another problem. Gunshot residue patterns didn't fully match a typical suicide scenario. The evidence wasn't conclusive, but it was enough to raise serious doubts. Suddenly, investigators were no longer treating the case as a suicide. They were investigating a murder. Detectives began interviewing everyone close to Michael. The first person they questioned was his son, Ethan Harrison. Ethan admitted that he and his father had argued frequently. Financial records revealed he was drowning in debt. Credit card balances, failed investments, personal loans. The motive was obvious: money. Next came Michael's executive assistant, Rachel Morgan. Rachel revealed something interesting. A week before his death, Michael had become obsessed with company financial records. He spent long hours reviewing documents and making confidential phone calls. According to Rachel, Michael repeatedly said the same thing: Someone inside the company is stealing from us. Those words changed the direction of the investigation. Detectives obtained company financial records. What they discovered was shocking. Millions of dollars had vanished through fake contractors and fraudulent invoices. Someone had been stealing from the company for years. And Michael had finally uncovered the truth.
Investigators quickly focused on Michael's longtime business partner, David Carter. For nearly 15 years, David had helped run the company. He was trusted, respected, and extremely wealthy. But forensic accountants discovered that many suspicious transactions led back to accounts connected to David. When questioned, David denied everything. He claimed someone was trying to frame him. He insisted he had nothing to do with the missing money. Yet detectives weren't convinced. The evidence kept pointing in his direction. But there was still one major problem. Even if David had a motive, how could he have committed the murder? The room had been locked from the inside. Days later, investigators re-examined the crime scene. That's when they noticed something previously overlooked. Near a bookshelf in the corner of the office lay an old silver pocket watch. It wasn't listed among Michael's personal belongings. The watch had stopped at exactly 9:47 p.m. Detective Hayes ordered immediate forensic testing. At first, nobody expected the watch to matter, but the results would change everything. Several fingerprints were recovered from its surface. One set belonged to David Carter, the business partner. Now detectives had physical evidence placing him inside the office, but they still needed to prove how the locked room murder had happened. The mansion featured a sophisticated smart home security system. Investigators brought in cybersecurity experts to analyze the system logs. What they found was extraordinary. At approximately 9:52 p.m. on the night of the murder, the office door lock had been remotely controlled through an administrator account. The door wasn't locked manually from the inside. It had been locked electronically. Someone had manipulated the security system, and only a handful of people had access to those controls. David Carter was one of them. The impossible mystery was finally beginning to make sense. Detectives obtained David's phone records. Cell tower data placed him near the mansion on the night of the murder. When confronted with the evidence, David remained calm. At first. But then Detective Hayes presented everything. The fingerprints, the financial fraud, the security logs, the location data. The room fell silent. David stared at the table for several moments. Then his composure cracked. Finally, he confessed. For years, David had secretly siphoned money from the company through fake projects and shell businesses. The fraud had earned him millions. When Michael discovered the scheme, he threatened to expose everything. David knew that prison, bankruptcy, and public disgrace were waiting for him. So he made a decision. He would silence Michael forever. On the night of the murder, David visited the mansion under the pretense of discussing business. An argument broke out. The confrontation escalated. And in a moment of desperation, David pulled out a handgun and shot Michael. Afterward, he staged the scene to look like suicide. He placed the weapon near Michael's body, used the smart home system to lock the office remotely, and left the property believing he had created the perfect crime. But he made one fatal mistake. His pocket watch fell from his coat during the struggle. He never noticed it was missing. And that tiny mistake ultimately exposed everything. Several months later, the case went to trial. Prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence: financial records, forensic reports, digital security logs, fingerprint analysis, and David's own confession. The jury needed only a few hours to reach a verdict: guilty. David Carter was sentenced to life in prison. The mystery of the locked mansion had finally been solved. A murder that seemed impossible, a killer who believed technology would hide the truth, and one forgotten pocket watch that destroyed the perfect plan.
Some criminals spend months planning the perfect crime. Others spend years covering their tracks. But no matter how careful they are, one small mistake can change everything. Because the truth has a way of surviving. Hidden in a fingerprint, a digital record, or even an old pocket watch lying unnoticed in the corner of a room. And in the end, that truth always finds its way into the light. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this crime story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-style mystery cases and criminal investigations.